Ladies and gentlemen, hello, good morning, namaste. I am Nipa Rai Chaudhary, your host here at the second edition of the Economic Times DataCon, and I am delighted to extend a very, very warm welcome to all of you to the Marcon Day presented by Dell Technologies. My dear guests, it is my absolute pleasure to be here and meet all of you. I do hope that everyone is doing great and staying safe, and of course, raring to go as we start the summit. Dear viewers, we know that the sun and sand are perhaps not going to be a part of our near future as we are all stuck in our respective homes. So, we wanted to bring you the joy of being on an island to you virtually. So, feast your eyes on our beautiful scenic layout. This virtual space has been designed to give you the maximum benefits of attending a virtual conference competing with the best of on ground experience and actually surpassing it, in my humble opinion. So, do take a moment to explore, connect with our event partners at the Experience Zone, click pictures at the photo booths, fill out the ETH feedback form because we love hearing from you, and socialize with peers at the Networking Lounge. Collect downloadable assets in your briefcase from our partner booths, which will also help you gain points and also stand a chance to win Amazon vouchers up to rupees 5,000, which is quite exciting, I might add. You can check out the details on how to garner points on our leaderboard. Each one of you already has 100 points just by logging into the conference today. So the race actually starts now. Ladies and gentlemen, it is said that customer experience is the next competitive battleground. And these words ring true, especially in this post COVID world. The purpose of business is to create and keep a customer. However, keeping them is not so simple. The Temkin Group research shows that 39% of consumers decrease their spending with the company after one single bad experience, and 17% stop spending altogether. Add to that how quickly consumers are sharing their bad experiences through word of mouth, social media, or review sites. It's fairly obvious that customer experience is paramount. All successful companies capitalize on this by improving the customer experience. Customers that have great experience with companies are 9 times more likely to recommend them and 7 times more likely to buy from them again. It is imperative that businesses become customer experience leaders, and that is exactly what we want to help you achieve today. So let me begin the summit by expressing our heartfelt gratitude to our illustrious partners. A big shout out to our presenting partner, Dell Technologies, our platinum partners, Tata Communication, Commvault, IBM, Logitech, NetApp, Hitachi Systems Microclinic, and Hitachi Vantara. Our gold partner, Juniper Networks, Exclusive Networks, Tenable, Zoom, Amazon Internet Services, Automation Anywhere, and Reddington. Our associate partners, Cloudera, MoEngage, and Samsung SDS. Supporting association, Data Security Council of India, and of course, our media partners, Analytics Insight and Silicon India. Thank you for your continued support. It truly means a lot to us. I would urge my audience to please visit our event partners at the Experience Zone. Throughout today's conference, I would request my viewers to please utilize the full potential of social media by using the hashtag ETDataCon. On different platforms, it is a way for us to stay connected as a community and talk about our shared interests. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me officially kickstart the summit. In just a few minutes, we will have our opening keynote. Be right back. and gentlemen, the topic for our opening keynote session is Mission CX 2030 Weaving Resilience in CX DNA. With changing times, the importance of customer satisfaction can't be stressed enough. It is the single most critical factor that could determine the future of your business. Marketers and their organizations must understand the changing order to build experiences that will result in consumer loyalty and influx of new customers. This session is for those conscious marketing leaders who understand that there is an urgent need to prepare resilient strategies such as creating consumer roadmap, incorporating better technologies like AI, investing in right system and tools, etc. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to invite our esteemed keynote speaker. Wherever you are, please put your hands together for Miss Millie Gillon, Global Head of Customer Experience, Standard Chartered.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're safe and you're healthy. We'll get through this soon. My name is Millie Gillon. It's so great to be with you today. I'm the Global Head of Client Experience at Standard Chartered. So I hear that you want to learn how can we start to weave in a client experience into our DNA and to help sustain us for the future. So these are a few different tips that I've learned along the way, along my career. And I hope that my scars that I'm sharing with you can help to prevent some of your scars. So one thing that is most important for any organization, of course, it is the culture. But what is the culture that you're trying to weave into or trying to massage a little bit? One aspect that I have found is extremely successful is to incorporate human-centered design thinking into a culture. That doesn't happen overnight, and it definitely doesn't happen instantly with your existing employees. Now, that doesn't mean to start to hire massively new skill sets, but instead to start to upskill and reskill some of your existing employees to really understand and think outside of the box around how do we look at things from the customer's lens, being customer driven, customer centric, rather than leading first and foremost from the business aspect. And that's not to say the business aspect is not important, because it actually really is. It just doesn't have to be the first most important aspect to focus on or the only aspect to focus on. So with design thinking, this analogy helped me to explain to others the value that design thinking brings. A long time ago, I worked at an insurance company and a life insurance company. And we focused on working in a waterfall methodology, meaning that we defined the scope of everything all at once early on before we even started day one of our work. And once we locked all of that in, then we spent the next 12, most of the time 18 months to continue to develop and iterate on that. But what we didn't do was to pause and take into account the customer needs, the customer wants, or even the changing things all around us in the macro environment. So an analogy that I used to help and explain why it was important to lead from the customer experience and focus from more of a design thinking perspective was, let's say that I tell your product development team, I need you to build me a car. And your product development team asks me all these questions: what color, how many doors, what's the horsepower, etc. And after 18 months, they present to me this beautiful new car. And that's great, but I don't use it. Why don't I use it? And this was actually a problem that we faced. Why doesn't anybody use it? We thought you needed it. You even said you needed it. So I said to the team, well, that's great that you created this car. I don't need it for this purpose. If you had started out with, you need a car to be built. Why? How would you use it? What would you need it for? Where do you need to go? And I would explain to them, I actually need to go from point A to point B, and that is 5 blocks away from each other. Or let's just pretend 1 kilometer away from each other. And so then the team could have said to me, you don't actually need a car. We could give you so many other things: a pair of shoes to go walking, bicycle, a horse, even, or an Uber or a car, a cab to drive me from point A to point B. So that's when a lot of people started to realize, oh, it's actually really important for us to look at it from the client's lens as opposed to being business driven. to really understand what are the client needs so that we don't spend the next 12 or 18 months or even longer to go and build something that the client might not use and it might not fulfill the needs of the client. So design thinking and focusing on a client centricity, environment and culture actually truly helps you to really understand what is the need that you're trying to fulfill, what is the need you're trying to solve for, what are the jobs to be done, you might hear. And in order to get there, what do you need? You need to actually speak to some customers. I am constantly asking a lot of senior leaders, when was the last time that you spoke to a customer and you asked them just one simple question, how are we doing? And quite often, both internally, externally, in all the organizations I've worked in, it's unfortunate that we don't get to speak to our customers enough. We don't push ourselves out there. That's a different topic, maybe for the next time we meet. But basically, how do you get started with really understanding what are the client needs? So the way that I focus on it with my team is to do some deep insights, really trying to understand what are the psychographics of the customer. Psycho what? So really trying to understand what are their motivators, what are their goals, what are their hopes, their fears, what are they trying to accomplish, and what is driving that? Who are the influencers? And then also really understanding what are the trends that are going on? What is shifting the world? What's going on in the macro environment that we need to take into account that's relevant to us, that's relevant to our customers, and why and how? Because once you do that, then you can really start to empathize with the customer. And when I say empathy, typically a lot of people say, oh, yeah, I already empathize. Or some people say, what do you mean? So, what I mean by empathy, what I tell my team is, I want you to physically feel the pain that our customers feel and go through. Because at that point, that's when you can start to empathize. And that's when you are driven to go and create a solution for that customer need. And this is one of the areas to weave into the culture, empathy. It's not just about saying it, it's about doing it. And doing it, how are you going to go about doing that? These are some of the exercises to go about going and talking to customers, then going through a design thinking sprint. And I'm pretty sure we can go on and on about what is a design thinking sprint. So, very high level, because I think that this could probably be another 20 sessions if I were to give you a deep dive into design thinking. Very high level, start with a clear definition of what you're trying to solve for. What is your problem statement? And it always starts with how might we, as in, how could we think of all the possibilities together to come up with a solution? And there are several rules earlier on. I'll get to that. But once you've defined that, then also empathizing and defining who is that specific customer or customer segment that you're trying to solve for. What are their needs? What are the pain points? Why does it exist? Why do you need to understand these things? And then from there, you start to do some unconstrained and then constrained brainstorming through customer journey maps. Now, for beginners, typically, I say it is important and it is essential for you to carve out what is the current state journey map. For those who are much more advanced, that you can skip over that and move to a future state journey map. And the reason why is for those who are new, it might be difficult to conceptually grasp what are you trying to do here? How are you trying to design a solution without knowing what exists today? Whereas for those in the more advanced state, it can be constraining if you focus on the current journey map and then iterate and develop from there the future state journey map, as opposed to opening your eyes and being able to design what that future, what do I want to grow up to be state on a blank piece of paper can be. Both have limitations and both have advantages. So don't worry. It is, think about it as baby steps for weaving it into your DNA on how to go about doing this, teaching everyone, bringing them all along. And eventually, once you and the organization have matured, you can easily move on to more of the disruptive types of future journey maps. And then from there, starting to narrow down on some of the themes and some of the ideas and do some storyboarding on these specific customer segments who would be going through a certain scenarios that ends up having a solution to their problems, and their solution would be your design. And from there, starting to prototype, what does that design look like? How does it feel? What does it look like? What does it feel like to go through that? And from there, carving out a test plan. because it's always really important to continuously validate or evaluate the solution that you've designed, and also take into account the macro environment. What do I mean by that? Pretend that this is 2020 instead of 2021. And let's say that you started this journey at the end of 2019. And by the middle of 2020, let's say that you did not take into account what is happening around the world or in the macro environment. The world has changed almost overnight, it feels like. And even today in 2021, it feels like the world changes overnight. But what I mean by that is if you don't look up and out and around, then you might fail to take into account how the world has evolved, and you will limit yourself in evolving your solution. So constantly validating it, constantly evaluating it, constantly keeping a temperature on what is going on outside and how should you be reflecting that in your solutions. Now, after testing and validating or evaluating, as well as understanding the external, what's going on, then what you would do is take this North Star that you have designed, basically, what do you want to grow up to be in 20 years, 10 years, 5 years out, maybe even a year out, and then work backwards to carve out how would you go about trying to solve this. And it's so easy for me to pause here and just say, okay, that's the end of the story. But actually, it's not. It's just the beginning of the story. The next step would be talking to your solutions architect. But typically, I bring them on at the very beginning so they know and they understand from a business aspect what were your thoughts, what were you thinking through, and what not to cut scope. So the solutions architect's role will ramp up at this point, and to help to carve out how do I build this solution? What are the systems? What are the technologies I need to buy, to borrow, or to build? Or what are the systems and technologies I need to buy and borrow so that I can buy myself time to go and build? Those are other aspects, key aspects, I would say, probably the most important aspect to weave into the DNA and your culture, but all from the customer centricity perspective. And now let's go step back. I know I've gone through some design thinking, how to use solutions architect and what to do with your solution once you have created it and how to iterate on that. But let's go all the way back to the beginning from the insights perspective. So it's not just about, okay, I will interview some customers and figure out what's wrong, what are their problems, how do I go and solve it? It's not just that. So there's quantitative and there's qualitative research. And that can be from the voice of your external customer or from the voice of your internal customer, your employees. Personally, I think that your employees are the most important customers that you will ever have, because if you make them happy, you make their lives easier, it makes it easier for them to go and reflect that to your external customers. And then from there, really understanding from a partnership perspective, what are some of the things that you could improve on? What are some of the things that you bring value to? Why do I say this? I truly believe that the future of almost all established industries is through platforms and ecosystems, and you get that through partnership. So it's really important to understand, how do you stack up as compared to your competitors when courting a partner? It's not all about me, and which partners do I want to select? Because believe it or not, the tables are turning. And it's important to recognize that. Sort of like dating. Who's your competition? So from there, also really understanding what is the voice of the benchmark? Who are your competitors? And when I say competitors, I don't mean your direct competitors and how do I stack up to my competitor across the street, but more so of who are your competitors from an experience perspective. I've done tons of research in this area, and typically what comes up are brands like Starbucks, Disney, Louis Vuitton, Singapore Airlines or Emirates, as well as the Ritz-Carlton and a few other luxury types of organizations. And it's important to really understand, why are they best in class from an experience perspective, and constantly keep in touch with what are they doing, so that you can take those lessons and start to incorporate it and weave it into the solutions that you design, as well as your organization and your culture. And really, the whole purpose of this, why is it so important to understand who's the best in class from an experience perspective? Well, because your customers are actually comparing you to these best in class organizations, whether you recognize it or not. And so I work in the banking industry. What does banking have to do with Louis Vuitton? Believe it or not, a lot. So you as an individual, as a customer, whether you recognize it or not, consciously, subconsciously, you're comparing your interactions with your bank to your interactions with when you go to Starbucks or your next trip to Disney or your next flight, hopefully sooner rather than later and safely, your next flight, your experience to that. It's important to weave that in, to constantly think outside of our natural boxes of who's my direct competitor and how do I stack up against them. And then the next and most important, I would say, or one of the most important, is to really understand what is the voice of the future. So everywhere around us are different types of signals. Some signals are louder than others. And when they become loud enough, they become a trend. And those trends tell us and direct us where could the future go to. So it paints a blurry picture of what is this world going to look like in 20 years. I say blurry because these trends cannot necessarily predict when is the next pandemic or when is the next market crash, but instead to tell you from a trend perspective, where are your customers headed towards? And directionally, where should you be heading as you think through these solutions that you design, as you think through your culture, as you think through where do you want to position your business? So I hope that this has been enlightening and helpful in terms of some of the scars that I've learned along the way, in terms of how do I weave in this future proofing, if you will, into a company's DNA, into a company's culture. It all starts with your customers. Depends on which customer you look at first. And just so that you know, the business perspective is actually most important. It's just a matter of looking at it from the lens of your customer and understanding what makes sense for your business and what makes sense for your customer and marrying the two. So I hope you found that interesting, insightful. If you have other questions or comments or feedback, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Stay safe, stay healthy. We'll get through this together.
Thank you so much, Millie, for sharing your invaluable insights with all of us. What a wonderful way to start the day, ladies and gentlemen, truly. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for our first panel discussion for the day. I will be back on screen with our speakers in just a few minutes.